In 1968, a hardware store in Michigan sold a hunting knife for $4. Today, if it's the right one, that same knife can bring more than $1,000 at auction. Here's the twist. The knife your grandfather wore on his belt every deer season, the one that got tossed in a junk drawer after he passed, might be the most valuable thing in the house. Number 6 on this list once came nearly free with a mail-order catalog. Now, collectors fight over them at gun shows. And number 1, well, those were built one at a time by hand, and men waited years to own one. Before we start, hit that subscribe button because you may already own one of these and not even know it. Let's count down the 20 forgotten hunting knives every American grandfather carried into the woods. Number 20, the Western Cutlery L. 46 Hunter came out of Boulder, Colorado, and hung on a card by the register in every hardware store from Denver to Cheyenne. It was the working man's blade. 5 inches of clip-point carbon steel, a handle of stacked leather washers worn smooth by a decade of grip, and a little aluminum pommel that rang when you tapped it against a truck tailgate. It cost about $3 in the 1950s, and grandfathers carried it in a basket weave-stamped sheath that darkened with saddle soap and years. It wasn't fancy. It gutted the deer, split the kindling, opened the feed sack, and cut the baling twine. That was the point. Today, a clean pre-1960 L-46 with its original sheath and the old 2-line Western States stamp can bring $80 to $200, more if the leather is crisp. Most of these were simply used to death. The survivors, the ones that spent 40 years in a dresser drawer, are the ones worth real money now. Number 19, the Cattaraugus 225Q was born in Little Valley, New York, and it went to war before it ever went hunting. Built as a quartermaster's knife in the 1940s, it came home in the duffel bags of 1 million returning GIs, and those men wore it into the deer woods for the next 30 years. It was a brute. A wide 6-inch blade, a fat leather washer handle with deep grip grooves, and a pommel heavy enough to hammer a tent stake. The steel held an edge through anything a grandfather asked of it. A soldier paid nothing for his, but a civilian in 1948 might spend $2. Here is what most families never realized. The genuine wartime 225Q with the correct blade stamp and the sharpening notch in the right place now sells for $100 to $300, and the mint ones climb higher. Reproductions flooded the market later, which means the real ones, the ones Granddad actually carried, are quietly getting rarer every single year. Number 18. Kinfolks knives came from the same corner of Western New York, and for a working family they hit the sweet spot between cheap and good. The Kinfolks Hunter had a graceful clip blade, stacked leather or stag look handle, and that honest small shop quality that big factories couldn't quite fake. A grandfather might have bought one for $1 and change in the 1940s, thrown it in the tackle box, and used it for everything from cleaning bluegill to whittling a roasting stick over the campfire. The company faded out by the late 1950s, and that's exactly what makes them valuable. Kinfolks stopped making knives before most of us were born, so everyone that survives is finite. A solid example today runs $60 to $150, and the rarer patterns with intact sheaths bring more. Collectors love them precisely because nobody remembers the name anymore. It's a ghost brand, and ghost brands are where the quiet money hides. Number 17, Robeson ShurEdge knives carried a promise right in the name. Robeson, out of Rochester, New York, built hunting knives that a man could stake his season on, and the ShurEdge line was their pride. The fixed-blade hunters had a warm, honest feel, jigged bone or leather handles, a blade that took a razor edge on a river stone in 10 minutes. In the 1930s and 40s, these sold for a couple dollars at the sporting goods counter, and grandfathers trusted them the way they trusted a good bird dog. Robeson eventually got swallowed up by bigger companies, and the original ShurEdge hunters stopped being made. That's the pattern you'll notice all night. The knives worth the most today are almost always the ones whose makers disappeared. A genuine Robeson fixed hunter in good shape now brings $75 to $200, and the early stamped ones climb past that. Most people find them in a tackle box and have no idea they're holding a piece of vanished American craftsmanship. Number 16. The Camillus sword. Brand hunter was as common in the woods as red plaid and thermoses of black coffee. Camillus, New York, ran one of the biggest cutlery works in the country, and their fixed-blade hunters showed up in every general store and mail-order catalog for decades. This was the affordable answer for a family that couldn't stretch to a premium blade. Leather washer handle, 4 or 5 inches of good carbon steel, a stitched sheath, all for $1 or $2 in the 1950s. Grandfathers bought them by the crate for hunting camp, and half of them ended up loaned out and never returned. The everyday ones aren't rare. But the early sword brand examples, the ones with the crisp old logo and the original edge, now fetch $50 to $150, and the military contract Camillus blades climb well beyond that. It's the classic story. So ordinary nobody saved them, which is exactly why the clean ones are worth chasing today. Number 15. Queen Cutlery, out of Titusville, Pennsylvania, made a hunter that felt a cut above. Queen was famous for its beautiful jigged bone and winter-bottom handles, and for steel that just felt right in the hand. Their fixed-blade hunting knives carried a quiet dignity, the kind of knife a grandfather saved up for rather than grabbed off a wire rack. In the 1950s, a good queen hunter might run $3 or $4, real money for a working man, so the ones that got bought were treasured. That care is why so many survive in good shape. And collectors have noticed. A vintage queen fixed hunter with genuine bone handles and the older tang stamp now brings $100 to $250, with the rarest patterns going higher. The bone handles are the tell. Real jigged bone ages into something plastic can never imitate, warming to a honey glow, and knife people will pay a premium for that patina alone. If Grandpa's knife has bone that looks alive, look closer. Number 14. The Schrade old-timer Sharpfinger, the 1520T, is the one almost every American family actually has somewhere. That distinctive upswept skinning blade, the saw-cut Delrin handle, the color of an old walnut stock, and the brass pins. It came along in the 1970s and instantly became the deer camp standard because it did one job perfectly. It skinned. A grandfather could buy one for under $10 at any hardware store, and he probably owned 2. Here's the twist that catches everyone off guard. The recent import Sharpfingers are worth almost nothing. But the original ones, made in Ellenville, New York, before the American factory closed in 2004, with Schrade plus USA stamped on the tang, now sell for $30 to $80, and the earliest saw-cut examples in the box bring more. Millions were made, so it's not scarcity. It's the American stamp. Flip the knife over, read the tang, and you'll know in 2 seconds whether Granddad's Sharpfinger is a $5 drawer knife or a small treasure. Number 13. K-Bar built its legend on the beaches of the Pacific, but before it was Ka-Bar, It was Union Cutlery, out of Olean, New York, and those older hunting knives are the ones that make collectors lean in. A grandfather who came home from the war often bought the civilian version, a stout, leather-handled hunter with that famous oval K-bar stamp, and wore it every fall for the rest of his life. It cost $2 or $3 in the late 1940s. The knife was nearly indestructible, which is a problem for collectors because it means most of them got used hard and put away wet. Here's the reveal. The early Union Cutlery K-bar hunters with the correct old stamp and the doghead logo now command $100 to $400, and the rarest pre-war examples climb past that. The name is on 1,000 modern knives, so people assume it's common. The old ones aren't. The old ones are getting harder to find every season. Number 12. Remington made rifles and shotguns your grandfather trusted, and for about 20 years, it made hunting knives to match. The Remington RH line, RH, standing simply for Remington Hunting, ran from the 1920s into the early 1940s, and these were gorgeous knives. The RH-4 had a clip-point blade, stacked leather or stag handle, and that crisp Remington stamp that gunmen recognized on sight. A hunter paid maybe $1.50 for one in 1930, tucked it in a canvas sheath, and it rode along on every hunt through the Depression. Then Remington sold off its knife line to focus on the war effort, and production stopped cold. That short window is the whole story. Because Remington only made them for 2 decades, genuine pre-war RH knives now bring $150 to $600, and the rare patterns with intact stag can pass $1,000. Gun collectors and knife collectors both want them, and that double demand is exactly what drives the price up. Number 11. Winchester, the name on more deer rifles than any other, also stamped its name on hunting knives, and for a brief golden window, those knives came into millions of American homes. From around 1920 to the early 1940s, Winchester fixed blade hunters sold through hardware stores and the great mail-order catalogs, and a grandfather who owned a Model 94 often carried a Winchester blade to match. The steel was excellent. The handles were stag or leather, and the stamp alone made men proud to own one. Winchester stopped making knives during the war and never truly returned to it. And here is the pattern break, the moment collectors live for. Because that Winchester name carries such weight, a genuine pre-war Winchester hunting knife now brings $200 to $800, with the scarce patterns climbing into 4 figures. Beware though, reproductions and reissues exist. The real prize is the original, the one with the correct old stamp that Granddad bought when Winchester still made blades. Number 10. The Puma White Hunter crossed an ocean to earn its place in American deer camps. Forged in Solingen, Germany, the White Hunter arrived in the 1950s and 60s as the knife serious American sportsmen aspired to, the blade you bought when you'd finally saved enough to buy the best. It had a broad, beautiful clip-point blade with a distinctive sawback spine, stag handles, and a heft that told you it was built for real work. A grandfather might have paid $20 or $30 for one in 1965, a small fortune at the time, which is why the men who owned them babied them. That care preserved them, and demand has done the rest. Genuine vintage Puma White Hunters with real stag and the correct Solingen stamps now sell for $300 to well over $800, with early dated examples climbing higher still. Puma stamped a production date code into many blades, so collectors can pinpoint the year, and the oldest ones are the most prized of all. Number 9. Case built its reputation on folding knives, but its fixed blade hunters quietly became camp legends. The Case hunting knives, the 300 and 500 series, had that warm Case quality in a shape built for the field. A clean clip or drop point blade, handles of genuine stag or laminated leather, and the finish that made Case famous. In the 1950s, a grandfather could buy one at the sporting goods counter for $3 or $4 and pass it to his son 30 years later. Here's what every family with an old Case should know. Flip the knife and read the tang stamp. The knives marked Case XX, made between 1940 and 1964, are the collector grade, and a fixed blade hunter from that era now brings $100 to $500, more for stag handles in top condition. The Case XX USA stamp that followed is worth good money too. The dots under the name tell the exact decade. That tiny stamp is the difference between a bargain and a treasure. Number 8. The Schrade Walden Deerslayer, the 15OT, was the big brother to the Sharpfinger and a serious deer camp workhorse. Made in Ellenville, New York, it had a broad drop-point skinning blade, that familiar saw-cut old-timer handle, and enough belly to open and dress a whole season's worth of game. A grandfather bought one for under $10 in the 1960s or 70s and expected it to last a lifetime, and it usually did. This is another where the stamp is everything. The American-made Schrade Walden and Schrade USA. Deerslayers, built before the New York factory shut its doors in 2004, now bring $40 to $125, with early boxed examples fetching more. The knife itself is superb, easily equal to blades costing 3 times as much, but the market values the American production run because it ended. That's the theme of this whole list. American factories closing one by one, turning honest working knives into small, appreciating pieces of a vanished trade. Number 7. Before the factory hunters, there was the Bowie, and western states out of Colorado made some of the finest working Bowies a common man could afford. These were big, confident knives, 8 or 9 inches of blade, a clip point you could shave with, stacked leather or stag handles, and a sheath a boy dreamed about. A grandfather who wanted one knife to do everything, from clearing brush to dressing an elk, reached for a Western Bowie, and it cost him maybe $5 or $6 in the 1950s. Most got worn hard and sharpened down to a sliver over the decades. That's why the survivors matter. A clean, vintage Western States Bowie with the old Boulder stamp and full blade now brings $150 to $400, and the rarest large patterns pass that easily. The blade length is the tell. A Bowie that's been sharpened for 40 years loses its shape, so the ones that kept their full original profile are the ones collectors truly chase. Number 6. Marbles Woodcraft is where American hunting knife history really begins. Founded in Gladstone, Michigan, Marbles built the Woodcraft pattern that nearly every hunting knife since has quietly imitated, a graceful blade with a distinctive upswept point, stacked leather handle, and craftsmanship that men treated like heirlooms from the day they bought them. In the early 1900s, a Woodcraft cost a few dollars, and outdoorsmen from Theodore Roosevelt's era swore by them. A grandfather who owned one owned a genuine piece of the frontier. Here's the fortune. The earliest Marbles Woodcrafts, made before roughly 1920 with the correct early stamps, now bring $200 to over $1,000, and the rarest configurations climb well past that at auction. The tang stamp changed over the decades, so collectors can date them closely, and the oldest Gladstone-marked blades are the crown jewels. If a family has an old knife with a curved blade and a leather-ringed handle in the attic, it deserves a very close look. Number 5. Marble's ideal was the companion to the Woodcraft, and for many hunters it was the one true knife. The ideal had a longer, straighter blade built for real fieldwork, that same beautiful stacked leather handle with the aluminum or nickel pommel, and the rock-solid Marble's build that made the name legendary. A grandfather carried an ideal through the Depression and 2 wars and still trusted it in his 80s. It cost a few dollars new in the 1910s and 20s, and because these were prized from the start, more survived in good shape than you'd expect, though a century of use took most of them. The early Marble's ideal knives, with the correct vintage stamps and honest patina, now bring $150 to $700, and the examples from before 1920 in fine condition go higher. The pommel style and the stamp together tell the age. Knife people can read a Marble's like a tree reads its rings, and the oldest ones are worth a genuine fortune. Number 4. Ruana knives came out of a one-man shop in Bonner, Montana, and they carry the soul of the Mountain West in every blade. Rudolph Ruana forged his knives by hand, often from tough spring steel, and stamped them with a simple letter M in a circle. Ranchers, outfitters, and hunters across the Rockies swore there was no better working knife, and a grandfather lucky enough to own one usually never let it out of his sight. In the mid-century, a Ruana might cost $10 or $15, and there was often a wait, because one man could only make so many. That handmade scarcity is the whole story. Genuine vintage Ruana knives now bring $200 to $600 and up, with the early stamps and rare patterns climbing well beyond that. The Circle M stamp and the hand-forged marks are what collectors verify first. These weren't factory blades. Each one carries the fingerprints of a single Montana craftsman, and that is exactly what makes them so treasured today. Number 3. The Buck 110. Folding Hunter changed everything. When Buck introduced it in 1964 out of California, it gave a hunter the strength of a fixed blade in a knife that folded safely into a belt pouch, and America went wild for it. The brass bolsters, the ebony look handle, the lockback that snapped shut with authority. A grandfather bought one for around $12 to $15, and it rode on his hip through every season after. They sold by the millions, so most aren't rare. But here's the pattern break that trips people up. The very first generation 110s from the 1960s have specific tang stamps and construction details, and those early examples now bring $100 to several $100, with the rarest early variants going much higher. The 2-line and 3-line stamps, the inlaid versus pinned bolsters, tiny details decide the value. A late model 110 is a fine knife worth using. An original first-year 110 is a small piece of history worth setting aside. Number 2. Case-fixed blade Bowies and large hunters from the golden era sit near the very top for good reason. When Case put its full craftsmanship into a big sheath knife with stag handles, a broad polished blade, and that flawless finish, it made something men displayed as proudly as they used. In the 1950s, a large case hunter or Bowie cost a working man real money, $5 to $10, so these were often gift knives, bought to mark a milestone and treated with care for a lifetime. That reverence is why so many survive beautifully, and the market rewards it. A genuine Case XX era Fixed blade Bowie, or large hunter with real stag, now brings $300 to well over $1,000, and the rarest patterns in mint condition climb far past that at auction. Again, it all comes down to the tang stamp and the handle material. Real stag plus the Case XX mark from 1940 to 1964 is the combination that turns an old family knife into a serious collector's prize. Number 1. Randall-made knives crown this list, and no other American hunting knife commands the same devotion. Bo Randall started forging in Orlando, Florida in the 1930s, building each knife by hand to order, and for generations of hunters, soldiers, and outdoorsmen, a Randall was the ultimate knife a man could own. The Model 1 Fighter and the Model 3 through 5 Hunters had blades of superb tool steel, hand-stitched sheaths, and handles of stacked leather or stag that fit the hand like they were poured for it. A grandfather who ordered one in the 1950s waited months and paid maybe $20 or $30, an enormous sum then, and he considered it the finest thing he owned. Today, that patience pays off beyond anything those men imagined. Genuine vintage Randall knives routinely bring $500 to several $1,000s, and the rare early models, correct sheaths, and special orders climb into truly serious money at auction. The maker's stamp, the sheath, the blade style, every detail matters because Randall built them one at a time and still does. If a family finds a Randall in a drawer, they've found the fortune this whole list promised. So there they are, 20 forgotten hunting knives that rode on the hip of nearly every American grandfather, and any one of them could be sitting in a drawer in your house right now. Here's my challenge. Go find Granddad's old hunting knife this week. Wipe it down, turn it over, and read the tang stamp, because that tiny row of letters is the difference between a $5 keepsake and a small treasure. Then, come back and tell me in the comments what you found. Was it a Sharpfinger, a Case XX, or did somebody in your family actually own a Randall? I want to know whose grandfather had the best knife in the woods. Share it below, and if this brought back a memory, you know what to do.